Yes, the title is clickbait, and hear me out first. I believe in science is a phrase that is often used as a statement to underline the moral superiority of someone, and while I don't have to tell anyone with an IQ of 70 or above why this statement is just stupid and outside the topic, a more leveled explanation is left out by the people actually in the field of science, and for obvious reasons which I will come later in the video. As someone studying materials science with an approved bachelor thesis on high entropy alloys, I dare to say that I have the basic requirement to talk about what science is about, what science can and what science can't. The context of this video will be in regards to moral standards, the philosophical aspect of it, whether science and religion can coexist, and whether a society can be formed based on scientific principles. But for that to be answered, we first have to figure out what science is. So, what is science? Well, we would have to make a clarification first in regards to what we are talking about. History is as much science as being a researcher in quantum physics. The underlying principle is the same, but when people talk about science, they're talking about stuff like biology, chemistry, physics, which is why I will stick to that definition of believing in science. This brings us to the question, what are these fields even looking at? Like, what exactly are they trying to figure out? What are they researching? Even if the fields are different, the fundamentals of these subjects are the same. There are laws in this universe, undeniable laws such as gravity, and the effect of it can be measured through observation. Gravity itself is the law of this universe. Gravitation, the actual force, is what people can measure. This happens under the pretext that the observations can be quantified, meaning everything can be reproduced under the same conditions. It doesn't matter where you are at the universe, the rules of gravitation will apply. So, one of the fundamental objectives of science is to figure out the rules of this universe. And I'm being specific with one of the objectives. Which brings me to the question, if exploring and figuring out the laws of this universe is one objective, what are the others? Depending on the field the scientist is working, the answer might change, but it can essentially be broken down to two words: efficiency and quantity. We want to be more efficient with the way we live, we want to be more efficient with medicine, we want to be more efficient with energy, so we figured out renewable energy. We want to be more efficient with transport, so we built cars. And we want to have cars for a lot of people, so we built a lot of cars. Quantity, however, doesn't only refer to the amount of products the human society develops, but also to the amount of research that paves the way to innovations. Innovation does not just come from research, but from a lot of research. There's also a third pillar of the scientific world, namely simplifications and models, but it's pretty much based on observation and quantification, which is why I will leave that out. But just keep in mind that there's a lot of simplification going on in order to understand the universe. Either way, now that we have clarified what science is and what it can do and what it can't, let's get into the whack side of science. It makes little sense for such a video to go too much into detail, but I will give 3 examples in order to show the limitations of the scientific world. The first example, what is light? You can clearly feel the light from the sun, so it has to have a, let's say, physical form for lack of explanation and words. Like you can even get a sunburn from staying too much under the sun. So clearly something is coming from the sun and is hitting your skin. Visualize light. Is it a ball? Is it a bundle of balls? Is it a wave? Are we talking about some random triangles? What the heck is light? The answer is, it's a particle, but it's also a wave. It's both. Does it make sense? No, it doesn't. It sounds like being a dog and an elephant at the same time. However, that's what the scientific world just accepted. To those that are interested, look up the term wave-particle duality. But to make it short, depending on the experiment, light can have the properties of a wave but also of a particle. It is what it is, and the scientific world just accepted this. Until a gigabrain comes around the corner to give a proper model explaining in a better way to describe light, this is what the scientific world will go with. It doesn't really change anything to begin with, but the lack of understanding certain phenomena result in simplifications and sometimes just acceptance, like in this case. The second example, now I said if you measure A under the condition B and you get C, you should always get C. However, in the realm of quantum physics, we reach some whack nonsense. Let me explain. Let's say A is measured under the condition B and you get the value of 1. Now you measure A under the condition B and suddenly you get the value of 2. You do it again and you get 1 again. You do another measurement and suddenly the value of 4. You make 20 more measurements and you get results between the value of 1 and 10. What the heck is going on? Well, first of all, when we talk about quantum physics, we're talking about phenomena happening at the scale of atoms or even smaller. There's an obvious limitation to how small something can be measured, and the realm of atoms is somewhat that limit. Or to make it a bit more understandable, if you want to measure the location of an electron that is orbiting around an atom core, it's really hard to do so. In this case, you will get probabilities of finding an electron at position X rather than a clear answer prediction in regards to where an electron can be. This is quite logical, but the point here is that certain things can't be measured due to physical limitations. Or to be more precise, in this case it's only possible to give a possibility, not a clear answer. The third example, what is beyond the universe? When the Big Bang happened, there was more materia than antimateria, and thus our physical universe was formed. But why was that the case? What caused the Big Bang? The answer is no one knows. There is simply no observation that can be done in regards to these questions. No one will ever travel faster than the speed of light to reach the end of the ever-expanding universe, so they can tell us what is beyond that. The point is, science doesn't have an answer to everything, and it will never be able to give an answer to everything. Now let's sum up the main aspects up before we go to the core topics of this video. Science is based on observation. It's driven by quantification and efficiency. In order to understand the universe, simplifications are being done based on empirical evidence. Empirical here means that it can or was or is measured. There's a physical limitation and a physical limit of accuracy to measure certain things. Questions that lack empirical evidence can't be answered by science. Before I continue, I want to throw some questions into the room which will be quite essential. Should science serve humanity, corporations, or countries? And should science, if it serves humanity, prioritize the well-being of most people or the survival of humanity? If science should serve humanity or corporations, should it be allowed to go against countries and even undermine the sovereignty of countries for the sake of humanity, or let's say corporations? Who decides based on what should be prioritized and what shouldn't? I'm not gonna answer these questions, but I just want to add that this makes it clear where we're going with these questions. There is zero benefit of drinking alcohol. If science is supposed to serve the greater good of humanity, and you do believe in science, then you better don't do any soft or hard drugs, because it's against scientific logic to do so. And science should be allowed to ban soft as well as hard drugs from society, meaning no alcohol to anyone. And if science is supposed to serve the efficiency of humanity, then genociding mentally or physically disabled people should be alright. Now let's get to the first core point of this video. Moral standards. It's actually a no-brainer to talk about this considering what I said so far, but I will do it regardless despite the repetition. Is it morally right to insult people? Let's say your parents and the loved ones. Religion is quite clear here. No. But how would you judge about this in a scientific manner? There is no empirical evidence available that would allow you to make a judgment about whether this should be morally right or not. To begin with, how do you even measure moral values? Who decides what is morally right or not? You may say that your rationality is enough to make that judgment, but just look at your nations and tell me that everyone agrees on everything. Regardless of how much education people get and regardless of how smart they are, people still end up with different opinions. Rationality is definitely a tool that helps us to guide us with judgment, but rationality alone can't replace moral values. If I believe that eating my pet that died is right, you won't have a rational argument to disagree with me. It is morally wrong, you know that it is wrong, you feel that it is wrong, yet your mind can't bring up an argument to why it is wrong. Why should me insulting my parents be morally wrong when they don't mind it? Why should me jerking off into my own food be wrong when I don't see anything wrong with it? Or let's take it a step further. Why should killing blonde people be wrong when most humans agree that blonde people should be dead? Neither your rationality nor your science can give an answer here because it's not the field science gives an answer for. It can't measure what it can't see or detect with devices. Moral values are philosophical and religious topics, and science lost nothing in it. Now, this doesn't mean that atheists can't be morally right people. As mentioned, humans have this unique feature of feeling that something is wrong when it is wrong, or call it divine revelation, it's up to you. The point, however, is that there is something within each and every human that makes him or her not want to do certain things. Philosophers call it the universal morality, religious people might call it divine gift. Either way, it's present. This brings me to the second part of the video, the philosophical aspect. Philosophy is largely based on rationality. It follows certain aims, and believing in science is usually a dumb way to say, I trust my rationality rather than rules by gods I can't even see. Technically speaking, you're not seeing any electrons either, assuming you're not in the field of science, but you do believe in them because a large amount of people, aka scientists, tell you that they exist, so it's not that different, but I'm getting away from the topic. I already mentioned that rationality has its limits. If people still struggle to understand what I mean, just try to imagine an infinite space. You would end up imagining an ever expanding space, but that's not an infinite space, but a space that is expanding. There are certain things our rationality simply can't comprehend, and there are certain things we feel that are wrong, but that we can't explain with our rationality alone. I would also like to mention Kant here, who wrote a really thick book explaining why us humans are born with a bias and that we are born with the desire to rationalize everything. Thus, it makes us unable to understand, let's say, more metaphysical things for lack of words. Meaning, we are at a loss of words when rationality can't help us out anymore. We feel uncomfortable not being able to explain things. But that's exactly the point where religions set in. What do I mean with that? For better or worse, religion provides a red line that can't be crossed because they are divine in itself. But why can you question religious laws when you are an atheist? Because you assume that these laws are human made. But if you can do that to moral values that are believed by billions of humans, what makes you think that your own rationality and your own boundaries cannot be questioned, and that a complete abomination of moral values can't replace them? What makes you think that eating pets or even humans is going to stay illegal forever? You may say that I'm exaggerating here, but I would like to remind you that not even 100 years ago, there was a specific nation turning humans into furniture and soap for commercial purposes. What makes you think that such a thing cannot happen again? We already live in a distorted society where depression rates are rising, while more and more is expected from students, while young children find inspiration in twerking and screwing physically and mentally their brains out. And the worst scums on YouTube are getting millions of views. What makes you think that our rationality will win over our basic human desires for prestige, power, and wealth? Are we truly prospering as a society in terms of moral values? And yes, you may bring the same argument for fundamentalists of various religious groups that take religion to the extreme, which is why rationality, and with it enlightenment, is more important and necessary for religious people than for atheists, but it doesn't change the fact that there is no divine red line setting boundaries for our rationality. This brings me to the synergy of religion and science. I can't speak for other religions since I'm mostly informed about Islam, but mentioned reasons are why science and religion can coexist. To be more precise, science tells you what the laws of this universe are. Islam tells you who set them. Science uses rationality in order to deduct nature. Islam uses rationality in order to deduct moral values. One has no contradiction to the other, and it doesn't come to a surprise that during the golden age of Islam, science flourished and advanced by centuries. And no, this wasn't just a translation movement, but genuine work in which entire disciplines were found, like algebra and chemistry. Other fields saw a significant improvement, like in case of math, astronomy, medicine, or science in general. Science answers how the universe functions. Islam answers who is responsible for it. You may argue that Islam is not based on empirical evidence, but so are our moral values, our family values, our ideas of a proper society, our principles to how to treat other human beings. Not everything is based on empirical values, and not everything has to be based on empirical values. If the universe was created by a divine being, then the laws of this universe, and with it science as well as our rationality, were created alongside of it. Gravity was never an argument against Islam, nor will it ever be an argument against Islam. If you truly wish for a society to be governed by science, Will you conduct murder to see whether a society works better if thoughtful assassinations against non productive members of societies are done? Will you insult and keep insulting your loved ones, outright slander them to get some empirical values in order to see whether it has a positive or negative impact on your life? Would you start subjugating and enslaving nations, assuming you can, in order to push the global CO2 emission down so humanity survives as a race? Will you mistreat people by, for example, taking their rights to vote away because they lack the IQ to make sincere political decisions, assuming you can? Would you throw your humanity away for science? Science is not a tool or ideology serving the greater good or moral superiority. Science works for discovery and progression. Yet this is not equal to helping the greater good of humanity.